Whoa, whoa, whoa. Before you buy a 13-inch M1 MacBook Pro, I hope you've done your research. Don't pick the wrong MacBook now, because with the introduction of the M1 chip, Apple really changed up the game quite drastically, because now the M1 Air is pretty much capable of doing everything a semi-pro would need to do. It launches native apps in a breeze, and everything is just so incredibly fluid. Final Cut Pro on both the M1 Air and M1 13-inch feel exactly the same. I really couldn't distinguish any huge differences, so it begs the question, why would I personally want to pick up the 13-inch over the Air when the guts of both are exactly the same? That's only partly true because the biggest differentiator here is that the 13-inch Pro has a fan. It might sound pretty dumb at first, but trust me, the addition of that fan propels the M1 to new levels. Who then is the new M1 13-inch Pro for? Well, we're about to answer all those questions and more, but before we do, we need to go over a quick unboxing and then we'll have a nice little conversation of how extraordinary this new 13-inch Pro really is. Spoiler alert. For the time being, I might start using it over my fully spec 16-inch. Yeah, it's that crazy. Alright, enough with the introductions, let's roll into the intro already. Okay, we'll go over this somewhat quickly because just like the new M1 Air, the unboxings don't change much from the prior Intel version MacBooks. As you can see, we have our MacBook Pro 13-inch opened up for us to marvel at that beautiful wallpaper. On the sides, we have color-coded MacBook Pro branding along with color-coded Apple logos. If we turn over the box, we feature our serial number information as well as what comes included in the box with your technical specifications. Apple, to this day, I still don't understand how you can attach the Pro moniker to your 256GB SSD hardware. 256GB is not Pro level and not it whatsoever, and you should be ashamed. At least give us 512GB at the bare minimum. Alright, rant over. This does happen to be the baseline model with 8GB of integrated memory, but I do have a 16GB version on order, so keep your eyes peeled for comparison videos of the 8GB versus the 16GB. But anyway, pull on this handy dandy pull tab, open up the lid, and boom, there it is. I know it's an unpopular opinion, but that iconic silver color is just beautiful, and I prefer the silver over the space gray, at least on MacBooks. We set that off to the side momentarily and cover the contents of our box. As expected, we have our literature packet that says designed by Apple in California, and inside we find our quick start guide, the warranty and information guide, and thankfully, matching Apple stickers. But let's be real, no one cares. Let's bring back the Pro that has this frosted plastic protecting it, remove it, and open it up so that it can automatically start up, and you'll hear that super iconic Mac startup noise, and that's how you'll know you're in business. So, the 13-inch Pro and new MacBook Air have the exact same M1 configuration options, except a slight reduction in color options. The M1 13-inch Pro comes in just two colors, silver or space gray, and start out at $1,299, $300 more expensive than the entry Air. But it can be configured just like the Air to up to 16GB of unified memory, no options for upgraded graphics cards. I'm sure that'll be reserved for the more powerful 4 USB-C version of the 13-inch MacBook Pro and the 16-inch MacBook Pro. The entry model comes standard with that measly 256GB SSD, but can be configured all the way up to 2TB of blazing fast storage. So if both have the same internals, then they should both perform the same, right? Wrong. The addition of a physical fan inside the 13-inch Pro is going to make all the difference. Let's start with some benchmarking comparisons to initially see what the numbers will tell us. The hypothesis for most people is that the Pro should perform slightly better over the more affordable model. Pretty straightforward conclusion, right? Well, let's see. So at least on Geekbench 5, both models actually score about the same. The 13-inch Pro scored 1730 on single core and 7529 for multi-core. These scores are barely higher than the Airs by just a hair, and I performed the Geekbench over and over and got pretty consistent results. This is to be expected though, because after all, they have the same internals and Geekbench doesn't draw enough power to have to turn on the fan found inside the 13-inch. That's because the M1 is incredibly power efficient. It's actually pretty insane. I also wanted to test out the graphical potential of both machines because, as I mentioned, there isn't an option to upgrade the graphics card. But even then, Intel's integrated options were decent at best, and with the GPU being housed right on the M1 chip alongside the CPU and RAM, we should expect to see improvements. I ran some heaven benchmarking tests on the ultra quality setting to see if there were any huge differences between the two machines, and there weren't. What I did expect actually came to fruition. Over the short to medium term, you can anticipate very slight increases in performance. As can be seen from my testing, the 13-inch M1 scored an average of 68.4 frames per second, while the M1 Air scored an average of 65.6, barely a difference to want to sway some over to the pricier Pro. However, let's not discredit the 13-inch Pro just yet. The M1 is extremely efficient, no one is denying that, and it's just so efficient that in the majority of workloads, the Air should do just fine. That's because it really does take so much to get those fans cranking up on the 13-inch Pro. The only times you'll notice big differences is when you begin to work with photo editing and even video editing. The Air this time around is way more pro-ish than meets the eye, but having the inclusion of that fan inside the 13-inch M1 will certainly be a welcome addition to anyone within the Pro realm, especially those that don't use Apple's native apps and instead use other software like DaVinci Resolve or Photoshop by Adobe. I did do a small test, and in this example, I exported a 5-minute clip, the same clip, using the same default master file export settings, and of course, the Air remained silent, but did warm up just a bit while the 13-inch Pro's fans weren't even kicking on at all. Like seriously, what does it take to get these fans to whip up? Anyway, in exporting times, the differences were pretty minor, with the 13-inch Pro managing to pull ahead ever so slightly with a time of 1 minute and 46 seconds, while the M1 Air clocked in at 1 minute and 52 seconds, just 6 seconds slower. Again, nothing drastic, but still slight improvements. And that's the thing. In a future video, I'll test out much longer 4K videos, exporting with different compressor settings, and using Photoshop and other graphically intensive and power-hungry apps to see how the 13-inch will react versus the Air, because for all intents and purposes, to the average consumer, you know, the one using Gmail, Facebook, YouTube, Word, and the occasional small video project on iMovie or even Final Cut Pro, the Air is seriously all you'll ever need. At the present, the 13-inch Pro should solely be reserved for those wanting to dive straight into the world of Pro apps and professions. Maybe if you continuously work with large detailed photographs with heavy edits, or maybe you're an up-and-comer YouTuber who will rely on a MacBook Pro to get you through all of your needs. In that case, I'd say the 13-inch Pro is a better pick, but man, you really gotta want to dish out that extra money only if you're serious about your hobby, your workload, or your profession if you use your MacBook Pro for your job. All I'm wondering is what Apple will be able to do to the 16-inch and especially the desktop iMacs, since those technically don't have to worry about battery efficiency. They're always plugged into the wall. So Apple should use the iMac's chassis and their resources to create a behemoth of an iMac with an ultra powerful Apple silicon. For now though, in terms of the 13-inch, I'd say once again, sorry to sound like a broken record, but the 13-inch M1 Pro and the M1 Air largely perform about the same for most situations. The Pro does have the edge with that physical fan that will kick in and cool those internals in the event you are working on heavy workloads, heavy multitasking, or graphically intensive tasks like maybe some gaming. The fan will allow for even greater efficiency, resulting in greater battery performance when under intense stress. But it's not all about the M1 and the fan that sets these two apart. There are several other reasons why someone might pick up the 13-inch Pro versus the Air, including longer advertised battery, thanks to a bigger chassis and that fan that ultimately makes the 13-inch Pro edge out thanks to cooling the thermals if need be while under heavy workloads. Apple advertises 2 extra hours of juice, up to 20 hours of battery life versus 18 on the Air. Both still extremely impressive. If it matters to you, the 13-inch Pro obviously sports the touch bar, which is absent from the Air. Both now sport a P3 wide color gamut and True Tone, but the Pro has a brighter display able to attain up to 500 nits of brightness versus 400 nits for the Air. And the stereo speakers on the Pro feature high dynamic range and in general sound punchier and with more bass as compared to the Airs. Other than that, that's it. I presented the facts and also have some opinions on the 13-inch Pro, and if it were up to me, I don't know, this is a tough one because $300 is $300, man. That goes a long way, and most likely, I can almost guarantee it, 80% of people that claim they need this Pro over the Air don't. Listen, I'm not trying to bash the 13-inch Pro. It's a truly remarkable piece of hardware with just insane power, but for most people, the Air will do the job just fine. If the aforementioned perks you get with the 13-inch Pro are worth it for you for $300, by all means go for it. The Pro is definitely more capable and has way more potential to handle just about everything, whereas the Air could lag out a bit when under intense stress loads. But I'm really curious as to which you guys would pick up. Would you want to spend that extra $300 for the Pro, or would you be very content with the all-new ultra-powerful M1 Air? Let me know in the comments below, and keep your eyes peeled for a ton of more content comparing and contrasting these all new powerful machines, as well as some battery drain tests and more unboxings, plus a very big giveaway I have planned for y'all. Until next time guys, take care, and I can't wait to catch you all in my next video.